At the National Gallery in London, there is a masterpiece that has quietly challenged human perception for nearly 5 centuries. The Ambassadors by Hans Holbein. When standing before this monumental canvas, one is easily overwhelmed by the splendor of silks and velvets, and the authoritative poise of the 2 men at the center. But I ask you to slow down for a moment. Look down at their feet. Do you see a strange, ashen, and distorted object, resembling a tear in space, that feels entirely out of place in this opulent room? Why would a master of precision, one capable of faithfully recreating every fine strand of mink fur, place such a malformed shape right at the heart of power? For 300 years, the world mistook it for a clumsy technical error, or a stain ravaged by time. Is there a truth so naked that it cannot be revealed directly, forcing the artist to conceal it behind a mask of deformity? Or are we, the descendants, truly standing in the wrong position to grasp a silent yet haunting message that Holbein sent from the depths of the past? Join me as we draw back the curtain on the most heavily encoded painting in art history in today's video. In the somber and heavy silence of a classical manor in London in the year 1533, Hans Holbein did not merely create a simple double portrait. He opened a gash in time, a magnificent visual feast that nevertheless harbors the chilling breath of impending doom. This was no ordinary moment in the steady flow of history. 1533 is widely considered the death year of the old order in England. It was the precise time when King Henry VIII was decisively preparing for his seismic and shocking break from Roman Catholicism to formalize his marriage to Anne Boleyn, plunging the entire kingdom into a dark labyrinth of espionage and lethal assassination plots. The atmosphere of absolute silence enveloping the 2 protagonists is, in truth, a tense muteness before the storm of religious secession sweeps away the ancient and established values of Renaissance Europe. Holbein, with the keen vision of a genius, chose not to record a moment of hollow glory, but rather a moment poised precariously on the precipice of collapse, where beauty and utter destruction intertwine beneath layers of fine silk and heavy velvet. Is there perhaps a truth so naked that it cannot be revealed directly, forcing the artist to conceal it behind a mask of deformity? Or are we, the descendants, truly standing in the wrong position to grasp a silent yet haunting message that Holbein sent from the very depths of the past? On the left side of the frame, Jean de Dintville embodies a confident and authoritative expansion of the active life. Dominating the pictorial space, he is clad in vibrant pink silks and draped in opulent lynx fur, unmistakable symbols of secular power and high aristocratic status. Every fiber of the fabric on this massive oak panel is rendered with such startling and meticulous realism that the viewer feels as though they could almost touch the warmth of the fur or sense the proud vitality radiating from this 29-year-old ambassador. On his chest, the gold medallion depicting St. Michael slaying the dragon shines brilliantly as an assertion of his role as a knight defending the faith. However, if one looks deep into Dintiville's melancholic and weary eyes, a much rawer and more painful reality is revealed. In secret letters sent to his younger brother in France, he once confessed to being the saddest man in the whole world, a captive trapped in a gilded cage of diplomacy, burdened with the desperate and failing mission of saving the relationship between London and Rome. The golden dagger he grips is not only a symbol of his strength, but also a direct testament to the fragility of life in a court where betrayal had been refined into a high art form. In stark and total contrast to Dinteville's brilliance is the somber, almost receding presence of Georges de Selve on the right side of the canvas. The Bishop of Lavore stands in a simple brown damask robe, representing the life of intellect, quiet contemplation, and spiritual values that were being violently shaken at their core. Though only 25 years old, de Selve carries the heavy air of a sage enduring the weight of a church standing on the very brink of disintegration. He was a moderate Catholic, a devoted humanist striving to find some form of reconciliation amidst the raging vortex of the Reformation. The balance between these two men, one of decisive and bold action, the other of profound and deep thought, creates two sturdy pillars supporting the painting's entire structure, but simultaneously exposes the underlying and hidden fracture between the two core ideals of the era. Both men lean against a two-tiered wooden shelf, a structure ostensibly displaying the pinnacle of human intellect and achievement, but which Holbein actually used to plant the very first signs of rot and decay. De Selve's hand rests upon a book, where a small and subtle inscription records his age, serving as a poignant reminder of the finitude of human life amidst the eternal and chaotic shifts of theology and politics. Holbein's sophistication also lies deeply within the floor where the two ambassadors stand. It is a mosaic pavement, precisely and carefully modeled after the famous Cosmati floor of Westminster Abbey, the site of England's most sacred and ancient coronations. This is not merely a decorative detail, it carries a biting and satirical geopolitical message. By placing two French Catholic ambassadors upon the Tudor dynasty's highest and most sacred spiritual and political foundation, Holbein executes a daring and challenging diplomatic code. It silently asserts that even if Henry VIII tries to sever ties with Rome, the cultural and spiritual bedrock of Europe remains an ancient, undeniable, and unified entity. However, the Cosmati floor, which traditionally symbolizes the perfect order of the universe, has here become the stage for a tragic drama of instability and uncertainty. But do you sense something unusual and unsettling lurking in the void of the space between them? Why, on that shelf, representing the absolute peak of human achievement, do the astronomical instruments on the upper tier show deliberately distorted and impossible readings, and the bizarre, elongated, and distorted object beneath their feet, which for many centuries was mistaken for a technical blunder or a stain of time? What is it truly? Is it a dark signal or a cipher regarding the vanity of human life quietly speaking from the deep shadows of history? The longer we look, the more we realize these inanimate and silent objects are gradually unveiling a story far more complex and gritty than the initial stillness of a double portrait suggests. On the uppermost tier of this wooden shelving unit were the most intricate and refined treasures, representing the vastness of the heavens and celestial bodies are displayed. We appear to be reaching the absolute zenith of 16th-century human intellectual endeavor. Amidst the profound, deep azure of the celestial globe and the cold, metallic glint emanating from the complex polyhedral sundials and the sophisticated torquetum apparatus, Hans Holbein has meticulously constructed a sanctuary of absolute wisdom. However, beneath this seemingly flawless facade of perfection, there lie hidden a series of bizarre and inexplicable inaccuracies, errors that directly challenge the surgical precision that was the hallmark brand of this master painter. If the primary objective were merely to showcase a profound mastery of cosmic knowledge, why then do the temporal indicators on these highly advanced measuring instruments point toward astronomical coordinates that simply did not exist in the actual reality of the sky during the year 1533? A compelling hypothesis posits that these are not mere instances of oversight or sloppy craftsmanship, but rather a meticulously crafted and deliberate cipher, a testament to the paralysis of human reason as the very bedrock of established faith began to disintegrate. At that precise historical juncture, as Europe was being violently torn asunder by the Protestant Reformation, these instruments for measuring the heavens, originally designed to seek out the eternal and the divine, seem to have been rendered blind in the face of a chaotic and fractured reality. The fact that these sophisticated devices no longer align with physical reality serves as a subtle yet powerful metaphor for the creeping human skepticism that emerged as the theological umbilical cord was severed. Holbein appears to have intentionally fractured the very laws of physics to sow a chilling sense of dread, a warning that once the order on the ground is shattered, even the stars themselves lose the sacred and divine orbits they once possessed. This profound disorientation of the celestial bodies reflects the ultimate existential fear of humanity, the prospect of a universe no longer steered by the hand of God, but left instead to the mercy of maddened worldly and secular ambitions. Upon a much closer look on the celestial globe, a treasure fashioned from leather and cloaked in deep blue pigment, the mystery becomes even more challenging to the human gaze. The positions of the constellations upon this globe are paradoxically reversed according to the ancient astronomical systems. The constellation Cygnus, the swan, which traditionally served as an emblem of spiritual purity and noble transcendence, now finds itself entirely misaligned with reality. This leads to the inevitable deduction that we are looking at a hidden political code, one that mirrors a royal foundations that were tottering violently. As Henry VIII openly challenged the authority of the Pope, the very sky of faith was overturned, and the guidance traditionally offered by the stars fell out of place. Most notably, the globe is not rendered from the perspective of a mortal looking upward from the earth. Instead, it is painted from an external vantage point, looking in from the outside of the universe. This acts as undeniable evidence of the overreaching hubris characteristic of the Renaissance mind, where humanity began to perceive itself as the focal point of the entire universe, daring to seize the very gaze of the Almighty, to dictate the laws of paradise, only to receive in return a reality that is both inverted and utterly hollow. The absolute climax of this dark and brooding code is found within the small, modest, cylindrical sundial, which quietly and chillingly points to exactly 4 p.m. on April 11, 1533. Historical researchers have identified this specific date as Good Friday, the solemn moment Christ drew his final breath upon the cross. The act of freezing time at the precise second of the Passion invites the hypothesis of a world in the process of dying, waiting for a rebirth that can only be achieved through immense pain. But why 4 p.m. and not 3 p.m. as strictly recorded in the Holy Scriptures? A highly persuasive theory suggests that this 1-hour discrepancy represents the hour of betrayal, symbolizing the exact moment King Henry VIII officially turned his back on the authority of Rome, effectively transforming the London court into a permanent spiritual twilight zone. This specific temporal freeze does not merely serve as a religious waypoint, it represents a profound suspension of time itself, where the once glorious Catholic history of England is systematically executed by a cold and brutal political decree. Venturing deeper into the gathering shadows of history, the cold bronze torquetum device is revealed to be far more than just a symbol of high-altitude astronomy. Observe very carefully the way it has been placed at an unusually and awkwardly tilted angle. A darker conspiracy theory, closely linked to the dense espionage culture of the era, suggests that this machine is actually calibrated to the specific coordinates of Rome rather than London. In 1533, Jean de Dinteville was positioned at the very heart of a massive and sophisticated French intelligence network operating within London. The fact that the Torquatum points toward Rome, the epicenter of papal power, but utilizes a distorted and warped scale, could serve as a clandestine warning regarding the imminent collapse of the secret negotiations intended to salvage the relationship between England and the Vatican. Each measured rotation upon these metallic discs no longer seeks to quantify the vastness of the galaxy. Instead, it appears to be relentlessly counting down the final remaining days of a dying world order, an era where the supreme authority of the Pope was once considered an immutable law of nature. The narrative surrounding the polyhedral sundial is also heavily steeped in the atmosphere of a conspiracy theory involving the impending death of Anne Boleyn and the many victims of the Tudor dynasty's rise to absolute power. Observe the second time zone on the dial, where the shadow cast is completely inconsistent with the general lighting of the rest of the room. Is it possible that Holbein secretly embedded the hour of death for the historical figures who were being swept into the lethal vortex of Henry VIII's power? The link between these distorted astronomical coordinates and the fixed positions of the stars might actually be a ghastly and prophetic astrological chart that Holbein gifted to the London court, a place where science itself had been weaponized to predict betrayal and impending ruin. The detail of the Milky Way, rendered so faintly that it is nearly invisible, serves as a crucial indicator. When humans become too preoccupied with the animalistic and predatory instincts of high politics, they completely lose the guiding path of eternal light, remaining forever imprisoned in the darkness of their own pragmatic and cold-blooded calculations. Probing even further into these spine-chilling hypotheses, the conspiracy regarding a secret astronomical society reveals that Holbein was not merely painting a portrait, but was in fact executing a secret covenant with his French patrons. These deliberate astronomical errors are believed to be a sophisticated sign language utilized by the desperate, moderate humanist circles who were terrified by the looming prospect of an all-consuming religious war. Holbein's extreme, almost obsessive precision in recreating these scientific objects serves as ironclad evidence that he could not have painted them incorrectly by accident. Every single discrepancy is a calculated dagger aimed directly at the ego of the arrogant ruler. The latitude errors found on the various dials, which deviate significantly to the north compared to London, might actually be secret coordinates leading to Palissy, the private chateau of Jean de Dinteville, which was considered the last fortress of moderate Catholic thought amidst a continent falling into ruin. Ultimately, Holbein painted a sky that was perfectly wrong as a means to describe a reality that was disastrously flawed. This represents a silent, artistic rebellion against a monarchy that was in the process of destroying its own spiritual foundations with its own hands. When the very order of the cosmos is distorted within a masterpiece of art, it signifies that the political order on the ground has already fallen beyond the point of salvation. That wrong sky stands as the most powerful and damning indictment possible. In the eyes of an arrogant and absolute ruler, the universe itself can be adjusted to suit his will. But to the awakened and the vigilant like Holbein, it is the undeniable sign of an inevitable and catastrophic collapse. Human intellect, if it is not accompanied by a profound humility before the divine, is ultimately nothing more than a journey leading straight into the all-encompassing darkness of history, a place where the flickering light of reason only serves to further expose the internal decay of the human soul. Leaving the inaccuracies of the heavens to return to the earth, we encounter a tangible, familiar world, yet one that carries a chilling stillness on the lower shelf. Why, in a space that gathers so many intellectual treasures, did Hans Holbein place a lute with a broken string at the very center? If you are well versed in Renaissance art, you will recognize that this is no mere physical defect caused by the passage of time. In the symbolic language of the 16th century, a stringed instrument always represented harmony, consort. A broken string signifies a jarring sound, a note out of rhythm that shatters the concert of humanity. It is a direct cipher, a deep, bleeding wound at the heart of Europe in 1533. As the Roman Catholic Church and the Reformation movement began to tear the unity of faith asunder, this rupture is more than just sound. It is the collapse of the concept of musica universalis, the universal music that believed everything in the world operated in divine harmony. The symphony of brotherhood has lost its most vital tone, leaving only the hostility that the two ambassadors are desperately trying to salvage. Right behind the lute, the flute case is also missing one instrument, another indicator of the deficiency of peace. To understand the context of this fracture more deeply, we must look at the men standing there. Jean de Dientville and Georges de Selve were not just officials, they were intellectuals attempting to swim against the flood of history. While Dientville shouldered a diplomatic mission in a London rife with conspiracy, de Selve, as the Bishop of Lavore, bore the weight of a church standing at the threshold of disintegration. Their presence on a mosaic floor, replicating the sanctuary of Westminster Abbey, the site of the coronations of English kings, further highlights the gravity of the situation. Even on the most sacred foundation, discord exists. The contrast between the holy ground and the damaged objects above creates a sense of precariousness, as if the entire world is standing on a thin layer of ice about to break. Look at the arithmetic book by Peter Apian, lying open. Right on the page displaying calculations is the word dividert, which means division. A detail that may seem dry, but accurately reflects the reality of contemporary society. At the court of Henry VIII, where power struggles and religious secession were raging, knowledge had been stripped of its divine purpose to connect people, becoming instead a pragmatic tool used for the division of sectarian interests. Holbein's emphasis on a division calculation in a space that should celebrate universal understanding exposes a bitter truth. Intellect was now serving the calculated fragmentation of influence between sects and nations. The dividert calculation is not just mathematics. It is the execution of the Renaissance community spirit, giving way to an era of cold individual calculation. The expansion of that division reaches further than the pages of books. It is etched onto the surface of the terrestrial globe located just beneath the shelf. If you observe closely enough, you will see the line of Tordesillas clearly depicted, the fateful boundary that once split the world between Spain and Portugal under papal approval. This is practical evidence of how religion directly intervened in colonial power and imperial ambition. This globe is not just a tool for explorers. It is a map confirming the partitioning of foreign lands based on political and religious decrees, creating a worldly reality filled with boundaries of ownership and territorial disputes between dynasties. Yet, amidst these signs of discord, Holbein still skillfully placed a humanist rest, the hymn book of Johann Walter. Its presence is a quiet shock. For Walter was the closest collaborator of Martin Luther, the man considered a heretic in the eyes of Rome. Why would a painter serving a king hungry for absolute power like Henry VIII dare to include such an overt symbol of the Reformation in the painting? The answer lies in the silent mission of the two protagonists. Both Jean de Dinteville and Georges de Selve were moderate Catholics, striving to find a third way, a middle ground reconciliation between the extremism of Luther and the rigidity of Rome. The hymn book is open to the song Veni Creator Spiritus, Come, Holy Spirit, a fierce hope for a dialogue through the language of music before the fires of religious war consumed the continent. It stands there as a silent prayer, a final effort to mend the threads of faith that had been torn asunder. However, looking back at the broken lute string above, we understand that the prayer came too late in the face of the brutality of reality. Peace efforts failed, and a darker truth still lurks in a grotesque form beneath their feet. Delving deeper into darker hypotheses, we cannot ignore that the position of the terrestrial globe was rotated with deliberate intent. The center point of the globe is neither London nor Paris, but Policy, Jean de Dinteville's private chateau in France. Some researchers believe this is a code for a paradise lost. While the world was being partitioned by divideur calculations and colonial lines, Dinteville yearned only to return to the peace of his home. The event of King Henry VIII publicly defying the Pope to marry Anne Boleyn in 1533 was the spark that rendered Dinteville's diplomatic mission meaningless. Conspiracy theories regarding a secret summit also suggest that these instruments were actually tools for espionage. The broken string was a signal for an exposed assassination plot, or a diplomatic covenant torn up right at the English court. Furthermore, observe the flute case. The absence of the fourth flute, the smallest one that usually represents the voice of the common people or the purity of childhood, suggests a shivering reality. In the game of giants like Henry VIII, Francis I, and Emperor Charles V, the smallest voices are always the first to be extinguished. The broken consort of the flutes is much like the social structure disintegrating before the storm of the Reformation. Every tool of intellect here, from Peter Appian's mathematics to Johann Walter's music, no longer served the sublimation of the soul, but had been turned into evidence of a treacherous age. Holbein did not just paint a still life, he captured a long lament for a collapsing world order, where harmony was strangled by raw, pragmatic ambitions. The beauty in the painting, therefore, is no longer a celebration of man, but a magnificent funeral oration for a dream of peace that has been shattered forever. Once we have journeyed through the silks of power and the fractures of intellect on the shelves, one final, agonizing question arises. What is that strange, ashen, and distorted object stretched like a tear in space beneath the feet of the two ambassadors? For over 300 years, from the 16th to the 19th century, this detail remained an obsession and a target of harsh criticism. Many critics of that era, with their narrow vision, dismissed it as a technical blunder by Holbein, a moment where a master of precision lost control. Some even insisted it was a meaningless cuttlefish bone, a symbol of cowardly escapism from the brutal political upheavals tearing Europe apart. This secret lay buried under the mist of ignorance until spiritual hypotheses began to emerge from the shadows of art history. In the world of Western collectors and scholars, there existed a shocking theory known as the vision of God. This theory suggests that death appears distorted, deformed, and terrifying to the mortal eye when viewed directly through the lens of greed and pride. However, from the vantage point of the Almighty, the decay of the flesh is a clear, inevitable entity characterized by absolute order. This grand truth was finally unveiled in 1900 by Mary Hervey through the term anamorphosis, a distorted perspective. To see the skull manifest correctly, the viewer is forced to perform a symbolic act, abandoning the frontal view of glamour. When you stand at the very edge of the painting and look across from an extremely narrow angle, the entire brilliant world above suddenly blurs, giving way to the stark image of death manifesting before your eyes. This is a brutal philosophical slap to the reality of 1533, a stern reminder that all royal ambitions ultimately lead to nothingness, following the philosophy of memento mori. But why did Holbein choose such a cruel and sophisticated concealment? To understand this, we must look into the grim circumstances of Jean de Dentville himself. In secret letters sent back to France, the young ambassador confessed in despair, "I am the saddest man in the world." He was imprisoned in a London rife with spies and assassination plots, where King Henry VIII was decisively tearing away the shackles of Rome. The skull at his feet is not just an artistic technique. It is his painful alter ego, the silent scream of an ambassador in an age where faith was betrayed. He stands upon a sacred mosaic imitating the floor of Westminster Abbey, but instead of sanctity, what emerges is a horrific deformity. Holbein performed a dark psychological dissection, proving that even on the most hallowed ground, death and vanity always lie in wait, if the heart is besieged by worldly calculations of self-interest. The final truth, the cipher of salvation, lies in a corner rarely noticed. The top left-hand corner, where a silver crucifix emerges almost guiltily from behind the opulent green damask curtain. Why did Holbein push the most sacred symbol to the very edge of the abyss? This is the cipher of forgetfulness. In a world spinning with measuring instruments, luxurious fabrics, and bottomless political ambitions, true faith has been pushed to the periphery of reality. That crucifix is not for those preoccupied with the splendor of pink silk or the sophistication of golden globes. It only reveals itself when the viewer accepts the need to look away from the glamorous center and into the shadows of the margins where truth quietly resides. Notice the dramatic correlation of positions. The skull, representing death, sits at the center of the lower vision, attracting all curiosity, while the crucifix, representing hope, lies hidden in the upper left. Holbein established a brutal spiritual confrontation. The skull is the unavoidable death of the flesh, while the hidden crucifix is the fragile hope for the salvation of the soul. The tragedy of the High Daisu and the collective tragedy of humanity is that they are surrounded by so much worldly knowledge and power that they are no longer sober enough to see the salvation standing right beside them. This work does not merely depict two powerful men. It is a map of the soul's lost path, where faith silently watches the inevitable collapse of all human ambition. Through the lens of Hans Holbein, The Ambassadors is not just a painting. It is a grand code regarding the vanity of life, challenging every generation to reconsider the true value of existence. Standing before this masterpiece, we are not merely admiring a work of art. We are facing a mirror reflecting our own finitude and smallness. The artist left behind a map where knowledge, power, and glamour are but thick mists covering a naked truth. Death is an irreversible necessity. It reminds us that truth often does not lie in the most brilliant things right before our eyes, but stays hidden in the corners we often overlook, while busy conquering the world. But amidst the abyss of decay, salvation is always present. It simply requires from us a different perspective, the perspective of humility and awakening, to realize that on the glamorous stage of power, death is the ultimate director holding the supreme power of life and death over every human destiny. I hope this journey into the dark ciphers of this masterpiece has given you a new perspective on Renaissance art. Which secret struck you most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And let's uncover the deeper layers of history together. If this exploration resonated with you, please like and share this story. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to join our future dissections of history's most mysterious masterpieces. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to our next decoding journey.